Wild animals don't distinguish between owners and bystanders when instincts take over. While it's easy to blame reckless owners for keeping dangerous pets, what about the innocent neighbors caught in the fallout? In this video, we explore how some pet owners met their end at the hand of their animals. In the early hours of a May morning in 2025, the town of Kufa stirred under the rising sun. Dust hung over the Al Hassanat neighborhood, where garden walls divided modest brick homes. One house stood out, not for its size, but for the strange roars that sometimes broke the night. It belonged to Akil Fakhr al-Din. At 50, Akil was known in the Al-Barakia district for his obsession with wild animals. Over the years, he kept hawks, snakes, baboons, even a bear inside his walled courtyard. Neighbors whispered, children stared. Akil ignored them. In April, he acquired a lion. The young male, about 4 years old, had been smuggled in from Syria. Akil named it Kahir, the Vanquisher. The lion arrived drugged and thin, its fur dull from poor care. Akil saw it as his greatest challenge yet. He kept the lion in a large cage in the corner of the garden, spending hours near it, feeding, watching, speaking softly. His wife Amira begged him to send it away. He refused. Then, on a Thursday morning, it happened. Just after sunrise, Akil stepped into the garden carrying raw meat. He unlocked the cage as he had done before. Inside the house, his family prepared breakfast. He knelt and slid the bowl into the cage. That's when Kahir attacked. The lion lunged, knocking Akil down. It bit his neck and tore into his chest. Akil screamed once. Amira heard it and ran outside, only to find her husband's body beneath the lion. Blood covered the ground. The lion looked up at her, still feeding. Family screams drew the attention of a neighbor, Ali Hassan, who arrived with a rifle. He saw Akil's remains and fired twice. The lion collapsed beside its cage. When police arrived, the scene was silent. Officer Mufid Tahir later described the lion's body lying twisted beside the cage, its face blood-stained, its eyes vacant. Some mourned Akil. Others criticized the government's weak enforcement of animal ownership laws. For all his strange habits, Akil had been a husband, a father, and a respected man. His death was tragic, and it was a warning. The government had ratified the Convention on the Protection of Animals in 2014, but enforcement remained weak. Exotic animals were still bought, sold, and smuggled across borders with impunity. In the black markets of Baghdad and Basra, lion cubs changed hands for thousands of dollars, destined for courtyards, Instagram pages, or brutal death. In the weeks that followed, lawmakers in Baghdad called for stricter enforcement of exotic animal ownership laws. There were talks of new licensing systems, of harsher penalties for illegal trade. But whether those changes would come, whether the lesson of Akil Fakhr al-Din would truly take root, remained uncertain. The lion was dead. Akil was dead. It was a tragedy, but not as heartbreaking as the next story where innocent young lives were lost. The sun had set over Campbellton, casting the New Brunswick town into quiet. In the apartment above Reptile Ocean, the exotic pet store on Pleasant Street, 2 young boys slept on a mattress in the living room. 4-year-old Noah Barth snored softly, his arm draped over his 6-year-old brother Connor, who was days from turning 7. Their laughter had filled the town earlier that day. That Sunday had been full. They played in a backyard pool, rode a tractor at a friend's farm, shopped for candy, and watched goats and chickens. They returned to Jean-Claude Savoie's apartment above his pet store, tired and happy. Savoie had been a family friend for years, someone their mother trusted. His apartment was lined with wood panels and aquariums of snakes and lizards. To locals, he was the reptile man, but one animal wasn't discussed openly. A large African rock python, coiled in a glass enclosure that stretched to the ceiling. Savoie kept the snake without the special permit required in New Brunswick, where African rock pythons were banned for being aggressive, strong, and hard to contain. He built the enclosure himself and believed it was secure. Few knew the snake was there. As night deepened, the apartment stayed quiet. The boys slept under thin sheets. Inside the enclosure, the snake moved. 14 feet long and over 100 pounds, it began searching. Drawn by warmth and unfamiliar scents, it pressed upward toward the ceiling. Behind a panel connected to the ventilation system, it found a gap, a flaw no one had seen. At some point before dawn, the glass enclosure was empty. The python slithered through the ceiling vent, its muscular body compressing, expanding, twisting with instinctive force. It moved silently, a creature older than memory, guided not by malice but by hunger and nature. Then, with a dull crash, it fell from the ceiling into the dim living room where the boys slept. The impact jarred them awake, but it was already too late. The snake struck swiftly, coiling its massive body around both children. They struggled, cried out, but their small voices were muffled beneath the crushing weight of the serpent. In moments, their ribs collapsed under the pressure, their airways sealed. There was no one to hear them, no parent's arm to pull them free. By morning, the town of Campbellton was changed forever. Jean-Claude awoke to silence. At first, he thought the boys were still sleeping. Then he walked into the living room and found the scene. 2 small bodies entwined in the coils of the python, lifeless. He staggered backward, his face white, his breath gone. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived, they found the snake still in the room, unmoving, but alive. It was euthanized later that day. Autopsies confirmed what everyone feared. Noah and Connor had died of asphyxiation, their bodies marked by puncture wounds. The town fell into mourning. The tragedy rippled across the country, igniting a firestorm of debate about exotic animal ownership in Canada. News outlets questioned how such a dangerous animal had been kept illegally for so long, mere feet above where children slept. New Brunswick officials admitted the province had been unaware of the python's presence, despite strict laws prohibiting such species outside of accredited zoos. Jean-Claude Savoie, once seen as an eccentric animal lover, now stood at the center of a criminal investigation. In the weeks that followed, authorities seized 23 reptiles from Reptile Ocean, many illegal, and euthanized 4 alligators found inside. The store was shut down. Savoie was charged with criminal negligence causing death. His defense argued that he had no way of knowing the snake could escape. The ceiling vent, they claimed, had seemed secure. After a long and painful trial, a jury acquitted him in November 2016. But for the people of Campbellton, the verdict brought little comfort. How could that ever bring comfort? Imagine what their mother must have felt. This next story is yet another case where an innocent neighbor paid the price she didn't deserve. It was quiet on Rockrimmon Road in Stamford, Connecticut, the suburban calm disrupted only by the soft pad of feet, bare, padded, and powerful, belonging to a 200-pound chimpanzee named Travis. 14 years old and raised like a human child, Travis had been a local oddity and minor celebrity. He'd worn clothes, brushed his teeth with people, drank wine from stemmed glasses, and posed for pictures with the neighbors. In a small town full of professionals and families, he was a curious and often charming anomaly. He was also, beneath the surface of all that human polish, an apex animal born with instincts no home could erase. Sandra Harold had adopted him when he was just 3 days old, pulling him from his mother, Susie, at a so-called sanctuary in Missouri. Susie, a zoo chimp, never saw her baby again. Travis's father, Coco, had once roamed the rainforests of Africa before being captured and turned into breeding stock. But in Stamford, Travis had his own bedroom, took car rides, and once appeared in a Pepsi commercial. To Sandra, he wasn't an animal. He was her son. On February 16, 2009, Sandra called her friend Charla Nash over for help. Travis had gotten out of the house, taking Sandra's keys with him, and she needed someone Travis trusted to coax him back inside. Charla had known Travis for years. She had seen him play with toys, give kisses, and lounge on the couch like a lazy uncle. So she arrived at the Harold home with a simple plan: offer him his favorite toy, a Tickle Me Elmo, and lead him back in. But what happened next was neither simple nor foreseeable. The moment Charla stepped from the car, something in Travis snapped. Perhaps it was just the unfamiliar haircut Charla had recently gotten. Perhaps it was stress. Or perhaps it was just biology catching up. Regardless, Travis let out a sound no human could mistake. A scream born of the jungle, raw and violent. and then launched. He didn't hesitate. He didn't consider. He attacked. Travis tackled Charla to the ground and began tearing at her with brutal precision. His teeth, designed to crack bones and shred fruit, sank into her face. He ripped at her hands, clawed at her scalp, chewed and crushed and gnashed with terrifying force. Sandra screamed. Blood painted the driveway and pooled on the sidewalk. In a frenzy of desperation, Sandra grabbed a shovel and swung wildly. It did nothing. She fetched a butcher knife and stabbed Travis in the back. Still, he mauled on. For 12 unbearable minutes, the assault continued, loud, primal, and horrifying. When police arrived, Travis, his mouth red and his fur matted, approached the squad car and tried to open the passenger door. The officer fired his weapon. Travis shrieked and fled inside the house. They found him later, dead near his cage, lying in a pool of his own blood. Charla Nash was barely alive. Paramedics rushed her to Stamford Hospital, where doctors fought to keep her breathing. Her injuries defied imagination. Her hands gone, her nose gone, her lips and eyelids ripped away. She was blind. Her face, as one surgeon later described, was a mask of trauma. Eventually, she was transferred to the Cleveland Clinic, and then years later to Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where a team of 30 surgeons worked for over 20 hours to perform a rare and revolutionary operation, a full face transplant and double hand transplant. The face took, the hands did not. Complications forced their removal shortly after the surgery. But Charla survived. She survived years of pain, operations, and scrutiny. She became the unwilling face of exotic animal attacks, a woman whose life had been unraveled by someone else's pet. She wore a veil for months, hiding her scars from the world, but eventually she chose to speak. She appeared on national television, notably with Oprah Winfrey, and pulled back the veil, revealing the damage and resilience that lives side by side in her. After the attack, Sandra Harold was widely criticized. She died of an aneurysm in 2010, never fully recovering from the incident or the public attention. Her estate settled with Charla Nash for $4 million, an amount far below the cost of medical care and lasting damage. Charla then sued the state of Connecticut for $150 million, arguing that officials had been warned about Travis. Animal control reports, complaints, and sightings had been filed, but no action was taken. At the time, there were no laws prohibiting private ownership of primates like Travis. Her case was denied. The state claimed sovereign immunity. The law in 2009 had not been broken. Her suffering, however severe, did not override legal protections. The proposed bill failed twice. In 2024, it was reintroduced with clearer language and stronger intent. Her story remained in public memory and became part of the legislative effort. Over the years, Charla continued forward. She joined experimental studies aimed at reducing dependence on anti-rejection drugs, despite a mild rejection episode from one trial. She accepted the risks, hoping that what happened to her would not happen to anyone else. And who would want that repeated? But stories do repeat, just at different times and in different places. The sun had just begun to dip behind the tree line on a crisp October evening in Ross Township, Pennsylvania, when Kelly Ann Waltz stepped into the bear enclosure for what was supposed to be a routine chore. The 15 by 15 foot pen, reinforced with steel and concrete, housed Teddy, a 350-pound black bear who had lived on the Waltz property for years. Kelly had cleaned this cage countless times before, but this time would be different. She carried a shovel and a bucket, her movements deliberate and practiced. Before opening the gate, she tossed a shovelful of dog food into the far corner of the enclosure, a distraction that usually bought her enough time to scoop waste and scrub the floor. Teddy lumbered over to the food pile, but in the split second between expectation and reality, something shifted. Maybe it was the scent of the shovel, maybe a sudden movement, maybe no reason at all. With terrifying speed, Teddy turned. Kelly didn't scream. There wasn't time. The bear lunged, slamming her to the ground with a paw the size of a dinner plate. In seconds, he was atop her, snarling, jaws snapping. Blood streaked the concrete as her children, playing nearby, froze in horror. Their screams echoed through the woods, alerting a neighbor who rushed to the scene with a rifle. He found the bear hunched over Kelly's crumpled body. One shot rang out. Teddy collapsed, twitching once before going still. But it was too late. Kelly Ann Waltz, 37, was pronounced dead at the scene. Her children would carry the image of that evening with them for the rest of their lives. The Waltz property was no ordinary home. It was a private menagerie, a collection of creatures more suited to jungles and savannas than rural Pennsylvania. A lion, a cougar, a jaguar, a tiger, a leopard, 2 servals, and Teddy the bear. Her husband, Michael Waltz, ran World of Reptiles Incorporated and had been licensed to keep and sell exotic animals since 1994, but his license had expired over a year earlier in June 2008. Despite this, the animals remained. The Pennsylvania Game Commission didn't treat the lapse as a serious violation. It was considered a summary offense, the legal equivalent of a parking ticket. No animals were removed, no cages dismantled. The tragedy reignited a simmering debate. Should private citizens be allowed to keep exotic predators as pets? Experts stepped forward to remind the public that no amount of domestic care could undo millennia of instinct. A bear, no matter how long in captivity, remained a bear. One moment of stress, confusion, or hunger could turn years of routine into seconds of violence.